don't need to actually demo any. I don't need to share my screen. I'm just going to talk over the slide.
Sounds good. Hello, world. Our bi-weekly demo of the OMB Policy Library project. If you're watching this, you're probably on YouTube right now, either watching the live stream or watching a playback. If you check the playlist, you can see all of our previous demos from every 2 weeks. We've been archiving them there. We're going to show you the work that we've completed in the past 2 weeks, which is a little slow for the Thanksgiving break, but we got a lot of awesome things done. And I'm going to share my screen now. I'm Will Sullivan with 18F, helping this amazing crew on this project. Again, this is also recorded, so you can come back and rewatch it at any time if you want, or share it with colleagues. And at the end, we will have sort of an open conference line where we'll talk about the work and gather feedback and answer questions on what has been done. So here we go. We're completing the Ravioli sprint. We have a pasta noodle themed ABC order of our sprints, if you ever were wondering and started noticing that. So wrapping up today and on with the demo. First, we'll start with a tool on his basic import work. I will toss to you a tool.
Hey, oh, is that, can folks see the slide? I'm looking at myself right now. Oh, cool.
I'll present the slides, sorry.
No worries.
There you go.
Awesome. Yeah, so we did some experimentation with getting a basic PDF importer working. Right here on this slide, you can see on the far left side is page 2 of M1619 from the PDF of it. Basically, we use this Python library called PDF Miner, which is able to take out all the instructions from the PDF. Just to give a really basic overview, PDFs are not like HTML files or anything. They're really talking about the display of how something is printed out. So it'll contain instructions like go to XY coordinate this and display this text. And so we have to kind of reverse engineer from that, like what a line is and whether there's a space between 2 words and stuff like that. PDF Miner does some of that for us. It splits the document up into a bunch of lines. And so we wrote some code that adds some annotations to that. So we do things like look at individual lines and say, oh, hey, that looks like it might be a header, or hey, that looks like it might be a list item or a paragraph or a footnote or a footnote citation and so forth. And so that's what's shown in the second box there in the middle is sort of the layout of the page, but with our annotations of what we think are semantic parts of the page on it. And then we basically take that blob of annotations and layout information to try to create right now we're just creating semantic HTML out of it, but it's not hard to turn that into one of the XML documents that's, that represents an OMB policy. And so you can see on the right-hand side, that's actually just pure HTML. There's no CSS there. All the CSS that's on that right-hand screenshot is essentially just applied by the browser. So you can see that we're sort of taking the layout of the page and inferring things about like what looks like a first level heading versus a second level heading versus a third, what looks like a list, a numbered list or a bulleted list, what looks like a footnote citation and so forth. And we've put all of the footnotes at the very bottom of the HTML document, since that's the way it would sort of appear natively on the web, since there's no concept of pages. And there's a link down at the very bottom right. If you want to actually view that entire document, you can go to that link and check that out. So we're starting out with we've got M1619 looking pretty good overall. And so now we're just moving on to other documents and making sure that they import with hopefully decent like semantic markup. I guess that's about it.
All right, I think the next topic is, yeah, let me present everyone here. Where's that button again? It's always hiding. Forever hiding. Or am I already presenting? Here it is.
I'm presenting your presentation, so it's a screen of you. On the left screen, the screenshot. Yep, perfect.
Bada bing, bada boom. Okay, so this week we talked about how one might navigate within a policy. So there is kind of the goal here was to separate the ability to nav within just a specific policy, because they can get really, really long. This one isn't that particularly long, but we know that some of them are very verbose. So my goal was to kind of make sure visually that one goal is to make sure they visually felt separate, that the main nav, sorry, when I say they, I mean the main nav for the rest of the site, which we haven't really, sorry. This is what happens when you leave your cursor in Google and then try to click on things. Am I sharing? Cool. So we haven't really determined what that main nav is going to be like, but I just kind of wanted to make sure I visually separated it. And then we wanted to be able to nav within the policy by itself, and I just kind of built this little guy with just a little hover state or whatever. But more complicated is, what does that look like on mobile? So after looking at Carolyn, let me zoom in on this, make it a little easier to see. After looking at Carolyn's wonderful, I love wireframes so much. Wireframes, I was able to quickly kind of mock up. We wanted to be able to make it clear that you are searching or moving within the section that you're in or within the policy, and kind of divorce it a little bit from the main nav, or to kind of make it feel like they're very specific things. We also wanted this on mobile. We wanted to be able to hide these details that are kind of these secondary, if not tertiary, pieces of information about the policy itself into just a little nav item you could just click and open and close at your leisure. And then what do these look like when you click on them? It would be just kind of searching this policy with the little top guy turns to a close, and then the same for jump to nav. So you can see I'm still kind of playing around with whatever. I actually was thinking about this right before here, and I think I like darker better. I think this feels more elegant and for lack of a better word, cooler. I also was thinking about given those long documents we're going to have, I would think that this particular policy doesn't really need any kind of accordion style nav, but I think that's something we should probably be prepared to tackle. And secondly, we also worked on our buddies, the requirements and what those might look like when they are in line with other interactive things that are floating around the page that we're planning on building into this. And at first, I was thinking about, or one idea I had was I like the idea of kind of having a little end cap. So while it's nice to indicate the beginning of a requirement, it's also kind of nice to denote the end of one, especially because these might string together. Little did I know, foreshadowing, what that really meant. And another possibility would be a couple things. So we could use these little like kind of play button looking guys that kind of bookend it a little bit more, maybe. I don't know how I feel about the star. We can definitely test some of that stuff. And then what happens when a footnote is actually inside and is part of the requirement is another, because the stronger this is, the more it sticks out. The less strong it is, the more you kind of skim right by it, and the less interactive it becomes, which is something else we're going to have to test. And on that note, I will pass to Mr. CM.
Thank you, Ryan. I will share my screen. And we get infinite All right. So we did implement, Ryan actually worked on a previous iteration of those highlighted requirements last sprint. And so we started implementing that this time around. And we have all the functionality there. So we've got a star at the beginning, we've got that but at the end, and we're highlighting all the text. To implement this well, we needed to account for footnotes inside the requirements. At some point, we have requirements inside requirements. You could have links inside requirements, but that kind of nesting of content. But as we were starting to go through and look at what these requirements look like in terms of the actual document, we saw this kind of pattern a lot, where we would have a requirement and then a second requirement immediately adjacent to it. And so one strategy would be to combine those two and to make like one big highlighted section. But then we started adding more data. And as we added more and more data, we realized that we were highlighting everything. The entire document, more or less, is yellow. And if the entire document is yellow, it's like the entire document isn't highlighted at all. So we've got this working. We've got them inside tables. We've got them all over the place, but it's clearly not super usable. And so this coming sprint, we have an issue for coming up with a different strategy for this, because we assume that many of these policies are going to follow the strategy of the vast majority of the text is a requirement of some shape or form. But so we have all this functionality, but we didn't push up the data for this because it's not particularly useful. So let me hop over to the actual demo site. In terms of changes to the actual demo site, we have a little arrow that indicates that this is a footnote, just a nice piece to connect the citation to the actual content. We added a jump to the bottom because that's where we have some external links. We've added the ability to have an additional type of inline. In this case, they're links. And we modified the importing data so that the original PDF said something like executive order, a title, and then the URL. And we modified the data so that the URL was just part of the link. That's not an automated process because we think that it would be very error prone and we'd have lots of things that shouldn't be links becoming links, things like that. But we do have the ability to add these external links throughout. And we inspect the URL to determine what type of icons put at the end. If it is a website, then we use the external link escape icon. If it's a file, generally a PDF, we're going to use this icon that indicates file. To implement that, we're using an icon font. And icon fonts are iffy throughout. They let us do things like automatically size icons correctly so that the icon is the size of the text that contains it. And it deals with the colors correctly and things like that. But we also know that particularly federal agencies have a tendency to block fonts, web fonts. And so this is a point where we've made this decision to use a font, but we also need feedback from OMB and other partner agencies to figure out, is this something that's blocked in your environment? If so, do we need to get rid of those icons, or how will that work? And I also wanted to mention, this wasn't a big bug, and it generally didn't affect anyone. But we had a system where, so this is the live site, the current production. We're on the second page of results. If I entered in a page that was too large, I would get a 500. I'd get a big error. We fixed that up so that now you get a 404. Again, that's not a big change, but it was something that reduces the amount of log errors that we get. And with that, I think I've covered changes to the policy library. Let's head over to Carolyn.
Okay, hello. I'm looking for the presenty thing. Okay, what do you see myself or do you see slides?
I see you right now.
We see me? Okay, yeah, I know how to do this. now you see a blue screen that says research.
Yep.
Awesome. We did some research. And I want to talk you through that. What we did, so we spoke to 4 different people from the DCOI practice. All of those folks were responsible in some way for implementing DCOI, reporting back about that implementation within their agencies or divisions, largely on the division level, but they coordinated within their agencies and other groups. All participants report to this particular policy document frequently, and they were pretty intimately familiar with its contents. We weren't really talking to brand new users. They all had a particular familiarity. They kind of knew what sections they wanted to go to. They were able to sort of compare, like, oh, in the version that I'm used to looking at, it looks a little different. So that's interesting to note about their level of familiarity. The questions that we were hoping to find answers to. The first question is just sort of broadly general. Does the way we're displaying M1619 make sense to users who are familiar with the policy? Are users able to understand how to view the footnotes and then get back to the place where they were in the main text? You know, one question that came up is, do users think the gold headings are interactive? Do a little future looking, what are the most important next features to develop in the full text policy? So in that policy detail page, there's a lot of things that we can do for it. I'm going to get a sense of what users might be looking for. And then for each question, we had a sense of, like, we'll know we're right, or we'll know we feel like we have an answer based on things that we would see in the usability session. So in usability testing, users don't express confusion about the way information is displayed. If things were, like, way off from their expectations, that usually comes out pretty easily. If users could show and hide footnotes without frustration or confusion. If users think that the gold headings are interactive, we would expect to see them try to click on them during the usability session. That's one of those things where it's like the absence of a behavior is a positive sign, because we don't necessarily want to ask users, can you click on that heading? Because they'll be like, oh, let me see. And that doesn't really tell us very much. It doesn't tell us what they were expecting. And then for next features, you know, without prompting, users request specific added functionality. This is the most important part, are able to articulate how that functionality would help them do their job better. And making that second part is most important because people are very good at asking for features that they will never use. But if they can relate it back to the job they're doing now and clearly articulate what would be easier, then we have a much more solid basis for pursuing that. So first question, does the way we're displaying this policy make sense for users? Is yes, yay. Not only that, but people really liked the overall typography and the visual hierarchy of the headers. More than actually I was expecting to see. They liked the larger font size, and they liked being able to see the headers just very clearly as they're skimming down the page. Next up, are they able to clearly understand and trigger the footnotes? Generally, yes. I didn't see anybody really have trouble figuring out how to do that. But what was surprising to me was how much they loved having the footnotes right there in line. We had 2 users who had the JavaScript functionality that they were able to see it in line. 2 people jumped down to the bottom of the footnotes, which was the fallback. But for the folks who did get that inline version, they really loved seeing it in context and not losing their place in the policy. And they really loved the larger typeface. And the user I'm quoting here said, I thought I'd have to use my bifocals to read the footnote, but I didn't. So that was really wonderful and confirming. The main issue we saw with the footnotes is that once people had established that the footnote would display inline, the table they were a little surprised that it functioned differently. I think that's something that we just want to keep an eye on and consider, like, is there a way we can make that footnote behavior a little more consistent so that once that expectation is set up, it persists throughout the issue. Obviously want to balance that against, you know, technical constraints and design challenges that may come up with trying to do that. The only other thing is the actual text that says footnote 1 or footnote 2. And we might want to consider just bumping it up just a tiny bit so it's a little bit easier to read. They generally liked having a larger target to click on. One user said that explicitly, that she liked that she didn't have to search for a teeny tiny number. Okay, do users think the gold headings are interactive? I don't have any good quotes on this because we didn't ask directly, but generally no. We didn't have anybody try to click on the headers or even hesitate. So that's a good, you know, that's a nice confirmation. Certainly when you have headers that are a different color than the regular text, they can look like links. In this case, it wasn't an issue. There's no way to know that beforehand. That doesn't mean we can't change the text color for aesthetic reasons. It's just not a usability issue. And then what are the most important next features to develop in the full text policy? Mostly what we heard had to do with providing additional information to like alleviate confusion that folks are having, interpreting the policy, understanding what the equations meant. They referred to those metrics all the time. They wanted to see additional resources like, you know, templates of how the calculations are put together. They wanted to see examples of best practices from other orgs for how do you compile the report, how do you fill out the spreadsheet, how to calculate the metrics, and then also guidance on how to fill out the report. So some users want to know how the policy has changed, and they want to be able to compare the previous version of the policy, although it was really just an earlier policy on the same topic. We don't really have versioning. They want to know how, like, what has changed between that policy and this policy, because they may have put tremendous efforts towards reaching the goals in the first policy, only to have it change on them. So they want to be able to point to the older one, at least to be able to see, like, justify this is why we were doing it this way. You know, other users want to see notifications of new versions of statute or policy that are being worked on now that could impact this and impact these goals. Prepare for future changes. In the research, we can distill a few different recommendations. One is consider options for treating footnotes consistently, you know, even within the tables, you know, balancing that between the technical and design challenges it presents and other priorities. Very careful considering, I forgot to point out, this is the UX researcher's warning. Humans are really, really bad at predicting what they're going to use in the future. So we want to continuously validate as we pursue any of these things. Not to say that they're not going to be helpful, but we just want to constantly be checking in. There. How do we add additional content without disrupting the clean layout and the clear visual hierarchy that is working really well now? And then third one, really tiny tweak, boost the typeface size slightly on the footnote buttons just so that they're tiny, a little bit easier to read. So a note on point 2 about like adding additional content, you know, the visual hierarchy, just a little demo for like, why is that important? What you can get when you keep adding stuff to the interface and adding stuff to the interface is you get the find the cat photo that there's so much stuff on the screen and there's a cat somewhere in there. And the cat represents the content that the user wants to find. But if we keep adding more and more stuff, it's really hard to find the cat. And that's not what I wanted. If I want to exit full screen, I don't know how to do it, but imagine, see, now you're getting previews. Never let me have the camera. Cool, so here we are. Anyway, if you were wondering, the cat is right here. And if we had less stuff in this frame, find the cat. That's the moral of that story. one thing that we didn't have much in terms of findings to present is Austin has been doing a ton of research and really great work on the PDF importer and authoring tool workflow. He's in the middle of doing those interviews, and we should expect some things we can present for the next demo. I just wanted to point out that it is ongoing, and there's some really interesting stuff going on. Going to start planning for usability testing with the next iteration of the policy detail pages, the internal navigation that Ryan was just showing, as well as those paragraph anchor links, to see how all this content starts working together as we start layering on functionality. And now I will pass on back to Will, and I've already spoiled his news. I'm sorry.
No problemo. Okay. Ooh, gotta catch up on the slides. Yes, so the big news is the ATO has been signed, so we're good for another year. That's very fun. Boom shakalaka. Yeah. And that's going to wrap our demo for today. Our next one will be on December 15th, Friday, December 15th, same time. You can stay tuned to the channel for more information, follow and watch all of our old videos. And now we will move into the call-in section, where we'll do a little conference call. You can go ahead and close this YouTube window, but first dial in on either of those phone numbers and enter that call-in ID number. And we will keep this up for a couple minutes while people do that, and we'll talk to you on the telephone. Thanks, everyone. Oh, back up one. There we go. Nope. Okay, don't touch. Okay, talk to you on the phone.